that later. So this is our bike plan. This is always special, giving a presentation you've never seen before. Anyway, the plan is available. It's just not being rolled out. There are copies of it over here in the corner for anybody that wants it. We have a diskette plus a handout. So here now I can kind of take off a little bit with my spiel. On April 2012, the Illinois Department of Transportation launched the first multimodal transportation improvement program. It was transforming transportation for tomorrow. This multi-year initiative created an integrated model of planning and programming to support the development of a modern transportation system that works for all users. As part of the IDOT initiative, IDOT set about creating more specific planning documents to supplement the vision of the plan. The state bike plan is focused on non-motorized transportation and demonstrates the state's commitment to multimodalism. The detailed analysis of bicycling in Illinois and proposed design and maintenance recommendations now provide a pathway to promoting bicycling as a viable transportation option. And since this is the first iteration of the bike plan, we need to all be aware that the next iteration will be better, and it'll only be better with your help. So we're still soliciting input, and as we continue to do with all modes. So this is a culture change for the department. Basically, we have been highway-centric forever. And still, by any stretch of the imagination, 80% of what we do and how we do it, the money, the people, and everything else, is still highways. But the other modes are very important, especially the new emerging mode, because a few years back when the Secretary got her current job, we realized that adding lanes is simply not the answer. And this has been realized in other areas too. So therefore we are looking a lot to determine how the other modes can help lessen the congestion. And of course, one of the obvious modes is bicycling and multi-use paths, also freight, waterway freight, rail, and everything. So we have to look at the total system. Because if one part of the system doesn't work, well, the system doesn't work. So, as part of the state's long-range transportation plan, the state bike plan establishes a set of policies to guide future network development. The plan was built on 5 foundational principles. Access. Bicycling will be accessible to all Illinois residents, regardless of age, ability, background, or income. It also provides choices. Bicycling will be a safe and viable transportation option, among a host of other mobility options for people of a broad range of age disabilities in all areas of Illinois. Connectivity. Bicycling will seamlessly connect with other modes of transportation like trains, buses, and the state transportation system will provide diverse options for bicycling. Safety are foremost and always our all here, I hope. The Illinois Bike Plan was built on an innovative collaborative framework that united a diverse array of stakeholders across the state. As a multimodal planning effort, IDOT engaged in traditional and non-traditional stakeholders into a process that unfolded across a variety of outreach mediums. During the planning process, IDOT heard from over 4,000 members of the general public and over 75 organizations, including state agencies, regional planning councils, schools and universities, private sector employees, and advocacy groups. Input was gathered from various stakeholders throughout the state. They included the consultant team, IDOT steering committee members, IDOT division stakeholders, Federal Highway Administration, IDOT office representatives, advisory group representatives, MPO, city, and county transportation professionals, targeted stakeholders, and the general public. A total of 29 advisory group organizations participated in the project. A total of 19 public input meetings were held throughout the state, and as I said before, there were over 4,000 participants. In addition, 3,000 members of the general public participated in surveys, which contributed to the plan recommendations. The IDOT advisory group was particularly helpful to the planning process. The committee brought stakeholders who are normally only tangentially involved in the planning process, nonprofits, by bringing in a diverse This is really bad for me. So anyway, I guess one other thing I want to talk about was access is very important to the department, and that's access for all residents. And we want to offer additional route choices, education program, and the most important, funding opportunities for you. We have several programs to do that. One's Safe Routes to School, another is ITEP. I think you just recently in this area got an ITEP grant, and I'm sure other areas throughout the state did too. I think we announced 72 projects, I believe, for a total of $52 million, and that's federal dollars. So it's a competitive type process. So that was, I think, Saturday we did that. But anyway, with that being said, of course we're very interested in the livability benefits of biking, the economic benefits, also the health and safety aspects, and as Anne mentioned earlier in her video presentation about the health aspects of biking, and also the environmental benefits of biking. So as a result, the plan provides a framework for an emerging mode of transportation. And at the department, we do consider it as a mode. It's a new mode. So I guess with that being said, we would welcome you picking up a copy, and we try to answer any questions. I have staff here that could help with any questions you might have, so. Any questions?
You mentioned 0 fatalities. Is that vision 0? I mean, is it a formal program or is it a concept? Can you define that a little bit more?
0 fatalities is a concept that we've developed through our Bureau of Traffic Safety and in conjunction with the Bureau of Safety Engineering, which is both are housed within the Department of Transportation. This goal has been around for, I don't know, maybe 5 years, something like that. 7 or 8 years ago, Illinois was recognized as an opportunity state for improvements on fatalities. At that time, we were up to about 1,400, 1,500, 1,600 fatalities on an annual basis. And the 5-year goal was to get that below 1,000. Now that's not a great goal, to kill less than 1,000 people. But anyway, we accomplished that. And the numbers started to creep up a little bit again last year, and then the General Assembly took the forward-thinking step of making texting and talking on a cell phone illegal, and that, in my opinion, will drop our numbers back down. But the aspirational goal, if you will, is still 0. Now, I don't think that's obtainable, but that's been our goal for a few years. I can't really tell you how long. I'm sure there's more information available from the Bureau of Safety Engineering. So.
Do you want to wait for questions until the end?
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, a second. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Well, thanks to Chuck. That's a tough spot to find out you're going to do a presentation to 300 people just before you go to sleep that night. Which will come back to work very soon and feeling well. So that part of the presentation really was speaking to IDOT's commitment to bicycling by doing this transportation plan. The second part of this session is more about the very specific tasks. So, League of Illinois Bicyclists, one of our things that we do is we take a look to see what is impacting bicyclists around the state. What policies are out there? What things might need to change or could be improved so that we have better outcomes for cyclists. We have been very, very involved. There's this one. We've been very involved with the bike plan, working with IDOT, collaborating with them. And what I'd like to do for the next 20 minutes or so is go through 10 priorities that we've identified for the bicycling community. What are these priorities in the plan? What are some action items they've listed? What are some performance measures that are really going to make a difference for us as cyclists? Okay, but first of all, keep in mind that this plan that IDOT did, what is its span of control? What will it affect? It's important to know that IDOT has certain things that they control, such as their own state roads, approving other towns' projects, and a number of different items. But they don't control everything in the state. Your own towns are very important to what happens in your communities, making them more bike-friendly. But what IDOT has done with this plan is they've identified dozens and dozens of action items and performance measures for internal steps to become more bike-friendly within the department. Their performance measures provide a level of accountability that they'll be tracking as the months and years go ahead. How is the implementation of the plan coming? But the plan also provides recommendations for other agencies that IDOT doesn't control. And those might include other state agencies. They might include other local agencies such as your town. So if your town is looking for some good recommendations, look to this plan for some of those. But IDOT does not control what happens on local streets in your town. Okay, the website that I have here, IDOT still is put together their website for the plan, and we have a nearly final draft of the executive summary of the plan that's at that website right there. I'll have it again at the end of the presentation as well. So what are the key recommendations for cyclists? What are the policies that will impact bicyclists? Where should IDOT focus their implementation efforts? Again, there are dozens and dozens of recommendations, and what are the ones that we consider the most important. What I'm going to go through is 10 of them. 3 of them are for other agencies, non-IDOT, and the last 7 are going to be for IDOT. So we'll start off with Illinois Department of Natural Resources. The IDNR for decades has done a fantastic job regarding state-level trails. 3 key areas that they've worked on, including building and maintaining long-distance state trails, such as the I&M, the Tunnel Hill Trail, several others around the state, are because of IDNR. They maintain them. IDNR also is very proactive in trying to help local towns build their own trails as well. And they've done that in creative ways over the decades. And then finally, each year, they have a bike path grant program that provides 50% funding for locals, and that has built a lot of trails around the state. So the bad news is that because of the budget lately with IDNR, they haven't received as many dollars to pay salaries. And as a result, the special fund that had been doing those other 3 activities, the capital money, has been going away. What we're seeing as a result is the state trail system declining, the maintenance conditions being great. We see not as much activity, we don't see as many of those state grants. So there are a number of problems involved, and one of the performance measures of the plan is how many dollars are being spent for capital expenditures by IDNR. Can we get back to where they were 5, 10 years ago? And that's one that I think is pretty high priority. Second, bike content on the driver's test. How many people think that all of the motorists who live in your community know what to do around cyclists? Any hands, anybody? That's what I thought. Unfortunately, in driver's ed classes, and even on the driver's exam, we're not seeing too much material about bicycling. How to interact, cars and bikes interacting with each other, how to avoid contact crashes, and so on. So that's the problem, and it leads to unnecessary crashes, hostility, and so on. So one of the plan action items that we really like is to incorporate bicycling into the driver's education programs and driver's test. And that is critical, because if you include it in the test, then teachers tend to teach to the test. The good news is that the Illinois Secretary of State has expressed interest in working with us on content that we've developed for our bikesafetyquiz.com test questions. A whole lot of questions on there for motorists that can be used in driver's ed classes and so on avoiding the crash types that are common, avoiding or what are the different laws, and so on. So I think here's a plan action item that's a high priority that hopefully we'll be able to come back at the next Bike Summit and give you some good news. So the third non-IDOT priority I want to mention is educating cyclists. And that includes kids, that includes adult cyclists. We're not seeing really a lot of training in schools, and as a result, there's a lack of knowledge out there. We're seeing crashes that really don't need to occur because cyclists may not know how to handle the situation. And B, there's a whole lot of people that are just too afraid of bicycling. They don't have that knowledge, and so they're afraid, they don't have the confidence to bike to places around town. So that's a real problem. And the plan actually has 2 action items that we really like addressing this. It doesn't have a particular target on who should be doing this action item, but I think it's something that could be a collaborative effort between schools, health departments, local advocates, a lot of possibilities. So the action items are to basically educate all roadway users, including cyclists, and institutionalize this into schools. Very good goal. We'd like to see progress on this. Okay, so I'm going to transition now to 7 priorities that we see that IDOT has for itself in the plan. First one is road project selections. So when IDOT decides what roads to fund, what do they look at? They look at a number of things. They look at, is that road deteriorated? Is the traffic congestion on that road terrible? Are there a lot of vehicle crashes? If those factors and other factors are true, those projects likely will be the ones that get the funding. Well, what's missing, what I believe is kind of missing right now, is how about bicyclists and pedestrian needs along that roadway? Is this a roadway where there's just no accommodations? Is this a roadway where we have a dirt line along the road with people walking? So if we factor into that design decision who gets the funding, if we factor in bike and ped needs, then that'll help make sure that we eliminate some of these problem areas in our communities. So a planned action item does actually talk about that, prioritizing projects that have complete streets improvements, and there are performance measures on how much is actually built in terms of sidewalks, side paths, bike lanes, any sort of bike path features. So that's a very good planned action item that we are going to be collaborating with IDOT on. Number 5, bear with me a little bit, this one requires a little explanation. In 2010, IDOT adopted their complete streets policy. And this is for their own roadways when there are major reconstruction or expansion going on. As part of that, they adopted a selection table. That selection table tells you for a certain type of condition, traffic level, speed of the road, and so on, what is the appropriate bikeway treatment. And that's good to have that sort of specificity. So when certain conditions are met where a need is shown, IDOT will look at this table, and that will be early on in their planning phase as what they will include as part of the project. The issue here is that now we have 3 years of experience on how well it's working. What are some of the situations that doesn't work? And now we have new guidance at the national level called the Actual Bike Guide that has come out and provided a lot of new ideas, a lot of really good suggestions for us. So it might be time to revisit that table and evaluate, bring it up to the current national best standards. A couple spots where that might come into play. One is for roadways where 45 miles an hour or higher traffic. Currently, it calls for a side path, a trail alongside the road as the main option. And while that might work in a lot of cases, there are other cases where that won't work. When a side path is built, it requires the town alongside of the roadway to maintain it. So if it's an unincorporated area, or if it's a forest reserve, or it's some other type of place like that, then you may not have that side path built. And there's really no secondary that's given in the table, so you might end up with nothing, unfortunately. And that's something that we may want to take a look at. Another is bike lanes. You know, how often do we have bike lanes in that table? And do we need to adjust to meet the current best standards? Sidewalks aren't really addressed in the table. We may want to have a table that combines both sidewalks, pedestrians, and bicyclist needs into one big table. It might be time to take a look at that again, and the plan calls for looks at issues such as that. Okay? Also, having design fallback issues. Let's say the table might be considered the Cadillac of bikeway accommodations. But maybe the Cadillac is not possible. Maybe you have buildings right up against it, and you just don't have room. I think it's important to have fallback options, flexibility spelled out for what to do if Plan A doesn't work. Here's B, C, D, and E, and so on. Wisconsin actually has that in their own policy, a list of secondary options that can be used and provide guidance for IDOT's road designers. I think it's good to take a look at that. Okay, paved shoulders. Paved shoulders have functions besides bicycles. It helps with roadway maintenance. You don't have to repave the road as often if you have paved shoulders. And run-off-the-road crashes decrease for motorists when you have paved shoulders. Paved shoulders are useful if you have at least 3 feet of space, but debris does collect along paved shoulders. So in the plan, there's a performance measure on how many paved shoulders of 3 feet or more are added annually. And there are places where I would say we would prioritize where paved shoulders are needed. Maybe you're in an urban area, and the only way to get from point A to point B is that particular IDOT road. There's no secondary streets, there's nothing around. Well, in that situation, if we don't have a side path built or bike lanes built, then we really need paved shoulders. We need something. Sweeping of paved shoulders is something that's needed as well. Paved shoulders between towns where there's no paved township roads might be another situation. So this performance measure and an action item of expanding where paved shoulders are added will really help cyclists. Rumble strips. Raise your hand if you know what rumble strips are. How many people, well, let me ask this. If you're bicycling and there's a roadway with rumble strips, and you're not able to ride on that rumble strip because it might knock you over, how many people get the impression that motorists expect you to move over into the paved shoulder when they come from behind you? I think that could be an issue. I think, at least in my mind, in my experience, when I'm biking out there, there's almost like a motorist expectation that I'm going to move over into the beach. But if there's a rumble strip, then I can't. And it, in fact, might be less safe for me to bike on that road. So, rumble strips are coming. They do have a lot of benefit for reducing runoff through road crashes, but we have to do it right. We have to make sure that in every case that rumble strips, if they are added, are done properly. IDOT a couple years ago actually adopted a design standard for rumble strips, and it calls for them to be fairly narrow, for narrow shoulders. It calls for them to be fairly close to the stripe, and for there to be gaps, longitudinal gaps, so you can bike in and out of the travel lane if you need to. So it's a great design policy. We applaud IDOT for that. A long-term goal in the plan is, if rumble strips are added, that we use this design standard that's out there. And we think that's important not only for the roads that IDOT builds for itself, but also for roads that it funds with something called the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That is done to some extent, but we'd like to make sure that we're not adding paved shoulders in place, or not adding rumble strips in places where it can be really harmful for cyclists. Another recommendation that is out there regards resurfacing projects. So resurfacing projects really form the majority of what IDOT does in road work. There aren't as many expansion projects anymore, adding lanes, even reconstructions, but there's a whole lot of simple resurfacing projects. And that can really be an opportunity for cyclists. There are certain situations out there where if you just restripe it in a different way, there will be room for cyclists. So I have a couple of examples. One here is local, 50 Road. It's not an IDOT road, it's an Urbana road. But in this case, you have a 4-lane road where the traffic levels really did not justify having 4 motorist lanes. And there were other concerns involved with crashes and crossings and so on. So what they did in this case was they restriped it to what you see on the right, where now you have one through lane for motorists in each direction. You have a center turn lane, and you have room for bike lanes. And you have nice places to cross. So that's one application where a simple resurfacing can become something that benefits other users as well. Another example, in Carbondale. In Carbondale, Route 13, right through the middle of town, has pretty wide travel lanes, about 16 or 17 feet. And the standard is generally 12. You go down to 11 or so. There's plenty of room there. And that simple resurfacing project that IDOT is doing, the last I heard at least, is they're going to restripe it so there's room for bike lanes. And again, you're not building more asphalt. You're just reconfiguring the road to provide a little more space. Well, that's something that's in the plan too. The performance measure is how many of those projects where something can be done, how many of those resurfacing projects where something is feasible for cyclists, will we actually do something? And IDOT take the lead in making that happen. So there's a near-term goal and there's a long-term goal. When it's warranted and feasible, will we do that? And we applaud IDOT for including that in the plan. Keeping manuals current, we have, I think, 2 or 3 more. So IDOT has a couple of manuals that they use, and it's important for you as advocates to know about these. The first one is called the Bureau of Design and Environment Manual, and it judges IDOT's own design standards for its own road projects. The Bureau of Local Roads Manual governs how they approve road projects that your town might be trying to build with state money or whatever. So these are 2 manuals that really have a lot of impact for cyclists. The area of bicycle accommodations has really been evolving on a national level. So we see more guidance now than we did before. We see new treatments, frequent updates in the national policies. So it's really important that here at the state, we make sure that we keep current with those national best practices. A plan action item is to do exactly that. Within a year of release of new guidelines that come out nationally, that we incorporate that into the state manuals as well. And to make sure that when those changes occur, it isn't just in one chapter, the bike chapter of the manual, but it's throughout the manual so that you're consistent. So that's something that's kind of policy wonky. I apologize for being policy wonky on me, but these are something that really, really impact our cycling conditions out And then the last one I want to share with you is about sharing. It's about something called state and local cost sharing. And this is an issue that when IDOT does a road project, there is a requirement that the local agency pays 20%, and they share the cost of the project together, the bike and pedestrian features. That's actually a significant improvement since before 2010. It used to be 50-50, where the locals would have to pay 50, they'd have to pay 100% for moving telephone poles, and that really was an obstacle to bikes and pedestrians being accommodated on IDOT's road projects. But now IDOT with Complete Streets has moved to 80-20, and it's helped out a lot. It's had a big impact around the state. We're seeing more bikeways built with IDOT projects. We're seeing more sidewalks built. So it was a wonderful move, and we applaud it. Unfortunately, when towns say no, we don't want to contribute 20%, then what often results is little or no accommodation in places where they may be really needed. So that is something that has been a problem. Also, that 20% has led to project delays and redesigns sometimes because the locals can't figure out if they want to chip in 20% or not. And then the idea of having the locals pay a certain amount is something that the county DOTs look to IDOT for guidance on. And so we see several counties that have adopted a similar policy along county roadways. So, for example, Will County is one where they'll allow a local agency to build a sidewalk, but they got to pay all the cost. DuPage and Kane are examples where the county will pay all the costs themselves. But this idea of like sharing the cost for bike and ped, of having it be an a la carte feature, is something that sometimes can be an obstacle. So the plan is an action item. This is, again, this seems like a wonky one, but I think it's probably pretty close to the top priority for action items, is to address the issue with the 80-20 funding match for bike and ped accommodations. And what we're suggesting is to do the same cost share as the rest of the project. So if IDOT is going to build a roadway in the town, and they're paying 100% of the cost of the travel lanes and the rest of the project, then the bike and ped features should be in the same boat. It shouldn't be treated separately. Some reasons why we think that's important to do. One, by doing it in that way, by just assuming all the costs and using the same cost share, it'll better assure that these bikeways and pedestrian features are added where they are really needed. You won't have the locals vetoing because they don't want to contribute 20%. This same cost share idea is something that pretty much every state that's higher ranking than Illinois on the bike-friendly state categorization by League of American Bicyclists, all of them do that. All of them do the same cost share. So we're behind the people we're trying to pass on that list. But Illinois is number 9, by the way. And then I guess, this is something from historically. I actually had a conversation with Pat Quinn when he was a candidate back in 2002 about exactly this issue. In a candidate survey, he said, yes, I support the same cost share. So this is really a key. Again, a very wonky issue, but it is a key that will have an impact on people walking and biking in the state and making sure that the roads we build are complete. So I want to applaud IDOT again for coming up with this plan. It's an internal look at what's going on within their own policies. And I want to state that I'm bringing just the suggestions here of what improvements can be made. There's been a whole lot of good stuff that has happened, especially in the last few years. The enhancements announcement this Saturday, the Complete Streets policy that was adopted, are major steps forward, and IDOT has been doing a lot of great stuff. We're collaborating with IDOT. We want to work with them, and we're just pointing out these 10 recommendations as ones in the plan that we think will really help out bicycling down the line. Okay, so that concludes the first session, and I want to dismiss you all. What we're going to do is go to the breakout room